This program is brought to you by the partners of A Rood Awakening International. Help others find truth. Support A Rood Awakening International today.
Mainstream marketing has been flooded with a multi-million-dollar campaign to promote the Messiah. But is it pointing to a Savior that doesn't exist? Keith Johnson explains why the He Gets Us campaign sends a misguided message based upon a false idea of Jesus, and why the real question is, do we get Him? Because it's the end of the sixth day, the sun is set, and this is Shabbat Night Live.
As they take this message out into the world.
Well, Shabbat Shalom, Torah fans. Welcome to Shabbat Night Live with Michael Rood. Tell you what, I was watching a baseball game a couple of months ago at a restaurant, and what do I see advertised on the backstop behind the catcher? He Gets Us. This is a new campaign, if you haven't seen it, to promote the notion that Jesus gets us. They use the last couple of letters of his name to do the He Gets Us thing. But the real question is, do we get Him? I mean, we'll explore that tonight with Keith Johnson, who is right beside me on the other side of Tiffany Panaccio. Welcome, guys, to Shabbat Night Live.
This is going to be a great month. I am so excited.
Yes, so fun. It is Keith Johnson month here, Tiffany.
No.
It is. We've got the love gift. I mean, we've got all kinds of things. But Keith, starting Sunday, I don't want to miss this. So starting Sunday, we're starting something that we were just talking about off camera, that you taped yourself going up Mount Sinai,
And actually,
right?
the reason that I'm here doing this with you two fine folks is to let our friends know, our supporters know, all those that have been watching Shabbat Night Live know that I had something radically change in my life. And it started with you.
Oh, did it?
As we were doing this series, I kept asking, pushing you, Scott, you're so healthy. Scott, you're so healthy. And you would never say anything. Finally, I put my hand around your neck and I said, Scott, tell me what you do. And you finally told me, Keith, it starts from the inside out with a blood test. I did the blood test, and I don't mind telling you all, it has changed my life. So I did that, started making some changes, and as I'm in Israel leading a tour, I get an invitation to go to Saudi Arabia. No idea I'm gonna go, and all I thought about was you all. Our friends that are watching, and I thought, well, if I'm going, what about my friend Michael? I'd like to bring my friend Michael with me. My friend Nehemiah. What about all the people that watch? So what I did is I went to Saudi Arabia with the Scott Laird plan. I was healthy, and I climbed the mountain and brought people with us. And this Sunday at 1 o'clock, to continue in the spirit of our Sundays at 1,
Yes.
we're putting a wonderful little video together. Said, let's climb the real mountain together. That's it. This Sunday at 1 o'clock. And Scott, I want to tell you again, you have changed my life. I've watched you for 2.5 years, but you wouldn't tell me the secret. But I got it now. And I want everybody to get the secret. It starts on the inside, and then that way we're able to get to the outside. And I hope people will kind of figure that out as we
Well, you
go
look
along.
good, man. You
I
look
feel
great.
excited. I'm really happy. I'm really excited.
Yeah, no, I mean, you've lost weight, obviously. I mean,
To get personal like that? Do they do that personal stuff here?
you got this jawline going on. This is great. No, you look wonderful. Yeah.
No, it really is exciting, and I want to say this month is so important for two reasons. One, I really wanted to do this series about why not Jesus during a season where they say Jesus is the reason for the season, and they miss really who He is and what His ministry is. But the second, as important, was it's the end of the month, and I really am excited about what we have done with the Rood Awakening, but I am super excited about what we're going to be doing, and that's only going to happen if people continue to do kind of like what I did here, the love gift. It's our gift to a Rood Awakening. In fact, I'm going to actually buy everything here. No, I'm dead serious. I saw what the things are. I'm going to buy it. I'm going to support ARA personally because it's amazing. The supporters.
Yeah.
It's just amazing.
Now, Tiffany, you talk to the supporters a lot,
Yes.
right? On the phone and stuff like that. So
That's my
if
job.
you haven't met Tiffany before, this is Tiffany. And so, Tiffany, we have a couple of the love gifts in front of us here. So
Yes.
what is this in front of you there?
So this is the Name of God license plate.
Oh, cool.
And I believe it is an exclusive thing
is,
to Rood
yes.
Awakening. So I think that's awesome.
So what folks get for a donation of $50 or more, now this is thanks to Keith that this is possible. He gave us a teaching called the Christ Controversy.
And it is controversial.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's like, it takes us on a journey over thousands of years to explore the intriguing history of priests, prophets, kings, queens, and the mysterious ceremony of anointing. What is this?
Yeah.
So very interesting. This might actually be something to play, if you get dragged over the relatives for some thing you don't do anymore, but they do, and you get dragged over there anyway for a dinner. Bring this.
Yes.
There you go.
Just slip that into the DVD. but it's a great teaching, and it brings out why it's so important that we understand what Christ means. So thank you, Keith, for doing this teaching.
My pleasure.
So for anyone who donates $50 or more, this is what you get. And for $100, you get this and this. And then this thing, Keith, you were intrigued by this thing.
No, it's amazing. I can't believe this. I don't think people can see it on camera.
It's
turn it to the side. You can
right.
see there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 glass.
5 plates of glass there.
Yeah.
And it gives you this 3D rendering, I suppose, of the second temple.
Yeah.
It's really kind of a neat art piece, so you can just set in your home. But anyway,
that's
that's for supporting Rood Awakening for the month of December. And we want to thank you for doing that because, as December rolls around, we can only plan for next year what we do right now. And so that's why it's so important to do these things in December. Why do we do all these things? Why do you do all this fundraising? Why do you have to tell us about this before the teaching? That's why, because this doesn't happen without any of this. So thank you for it. And we have, we'll talk more about that in future episodes. But, Ted was here last week, but y'all are here this week. I just took, So Keith and Tiffany, we all have, so this week we start your new series.
Yes.
Why Not Jesus?
Yeah.
And that's what I was talking about with this He Gets Us
Yes.
thing. So what was your first impression, Keith,
I
when you
couldn't
first
believe
saw
it.
that?
I mean, they are spending money at the likes of what they spend for Mercedes-Benz.
Yes.
It's that amount of money that they're putting out there. And really, what caught me about that is that they push about He gets us. The question is, do we get Him? And one of the ways that we have to get that and understand that is His name. And people are like, oh, don't talk about the Jesus thing. But if you don't understand what His name is, what it means, you don't understand His ministry, you don't understand anything. And so let's bring that back together during this month where people, I think, need some clarity about that.
Now, you and I talk about our Jesus journeys because, let's admit, I mean, we met Yeshua, we met Jesus in Christian churches. That's how we were saved. Okay, so we can't discount that. So you and I talk about that on the series. So folks will find out about you and me. But Tiffany, we're going to put you on the spot. So what is your Jesus journey? Like, how did you first find Messiah?
Well, I grew up with a Catholic father and a Seventh-day Adventist mother.
Nice. So that's fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And I was around the college age, I decided that I needed to figure out what I believed and who the Messiah was, like who He really was. So I just went on that journey, and I'm so thankful that I didn't necessarily grow up in a specific church. I didn't grow up in the church, as some would say.
Okay.
Because I didn't struggle with that spirit of religion where that's its own battle to come out of, to really get to know Messiah face to face, without that. So when I finally was baptized and I gave my life to Yeshua, I remember people asking me, why did you pick this church? And I said, well, this is what I find to be most true right now. But if the Father wants to reveal more to me, I will follow Him wherever He wants me to go.
Good for you.
And I'm so thankful.
And that's a good way to be, right? We always have to be open. Even now, sometimes we get into this walk and we're like, oh, we know everything now.
Yeah.
It's interesting. One of the things I want to make sure that people know, I actually, in my first understanding of the name, His name, His Father's name, it was so overwhelming that I didn't really kind of know what to do. But what we do during this season of this series is bring people along. We're not beating people over the head. Would you agree, Scott? I mean, it's not beating them over the head, but gently bringing them along, understanding language, history, and context of His name.
Absolutely.
And that opens the door to what I call a wonderful opportunity to understand what ministry and His message is.
Yep. Now, we're out of time today, but we got to talk more about this next week. And we got to bring you back. We got to find out more about this Tiffany person here. All right. So Keith Johnson explains why the He Gets Us campaign sends a misguided message based upon a false idea of Jesus, and why the real question is, as Keith said, do we get Him? So you're going to need something for this one. So go ahead and get your bread and your wine. We'll meet you back here for the Kiddush.
Where do we get the name Christ from? And does the definition of the word suggest that there are other Christs than Yeshua?
In English, He is the Christ, in Greek, Christos, and in Hebrew, Messiah. We should know there's a connection between English Christ, Greek Christos, and Hebrew Mashiach, which is then in English, Messiah.
The Christ Controversy with Keith Johnson takes us on a journey over thousands of years to explore the intriguing history of priests, prophets, kings, queens, and the mysterious ceremony of anointing. The Christ Controversy with Keith Johnson is our gift to thank you for supporting A Rood Awakening International. When you donate $50 to this ministry in December, we'll send you The Christ Controversy with Keith Johnson on DVD or Blu-ray. Donate $100 and we'll send you 2 gifts. The Christ Controversy with Keith Johnson, plus a custom license plate exclusive to A Rood Awakening International, bearing the Hebrew name of Yehovah. Donate $300 and we'll send you 3 gifts. The Christ Controversy, the Name of Yehovah license plate, and this 3D glass artwork featuring an image of the Second Temple, complete with a wooden base inscribed with Habakkuk 2:20. These gifts are a limited time offer from Michael Rood to thank you for your support. Make your donation today and receive the $50 gift, the $100 gift, or the $300 gift. Get these exclusive thank you gifts when you make a donation to support A Rood Awakening International in December. Call 888-766-3610 or get your gifts online with a donation at monthlylovegift.com.
The Apostle Paul said that Yeshua nailed the dogmas, the doctrines and commandments of men, of the arche and exousia, that he overcame, that he nailed their commandments, their man-made dogmas to the cross. And because of that, we are not to allow any of the arche and exousia, any of the religious authorities of men who made up their own commandments to judge us. Because every one of the feasts of the Lord are prophetic shadow pictures of good things to come. So don't let any pagan, let no religious authority judge you concerning the Sabbath, the new moons. And on the Sabbath, we do not allow the world to judge us and tell us what to do. We know that Yeshua paid the price for us. And the last night he was with his disciples when he took the bread and he blessed the Most High with this blessing. Baruch atah Yehovah Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. He said, this represents my body, which is now broken for you. As often as you do this, you do it in remembrance of him. And then Yeshua took the cup and he said, this represents the renewed covenant in my blood. This is what this represents. This is what it's always represented. Do this in remembrance of me. And he said that prayer, Baruch atah Yehovah Eloheinu melech haolam, Borei Pari Hagafen. Blessed are you, Yehovah, our God, King of the universe, creator of the fruit of the vine. And he said, do this in remembrance of me, and don't let anyone disparage you. Do this until I come again, because I have made you priests and kings. Shabbat Shalom.
Whenever Michael Rood and Nehemiah Gordon and Keith Johnson get together, there's some conversation usually about the name of God, Yehovah. And that's not what we're going to talk about today, but we are going to talk to one of those folks today. Keith Johnson, welcome back to Shabbat Night Live.
Well, thank you for having me. It has been so exciting. I think it's been about a year or so. 2020, Shavuot 2020, Michael invited me over here, and we've seen so much happen in the last couple of years. And I have been humbled to be able to come and do some SNLs, and we've done some things together. But I have to tell you, Michael said to me some years ago, he says, you know, eventually you're going to need to come and do high quality production, he said. on the book His Hallowed Name. And so you and I did a series together, which we called The Name of God, Pure and Simple.
Oh, yeah, I remember
we
that.
did that. And if you remember
do
you remember the process that we took? Tell me. I mean, you do so much, Scott. I mean, do you remember what we did?
So you told me, say, come in, I want to do this series. Very few details. You just said bring the Bible that you use most, your favorite Bible. And so I brought in this Bible, and it still has the same painter's tape that I did when we did this series. It's just held together. And it's a Catholic Bible. And you said, bring that, and we'll compare notes and see where we get with different translations.
What I love about what you all have done, and you've done such a phenomenal job, with the SNL series, they go everywhere. They're free. They're on YouTube. They're on Facebook. Well, how many different social platforms do you guys have?
Well, they keep growing. And as we get kicked off of one, we go on another.
Excellent. So that's what we did, The Name of God, Pure and Simple. And at that point, I said to myself, okay, great. I did what Michael said. And then Jacob came to me, Jacob here, who does your YouTube producer, magician. I don't know how he does it.
Magician's pretty
and he said, hey, let's do something on the back of the book. So we have a CD in the back of the book, 80 different name combinations. He said, let's do something on that specifically for the Rood Awakening YouTube channel. And so I came in and I recorded that. We've just completed 8 episodes, say free.
Free, wow.
On YouTube.
Really? Okay.
And I tell you what, the response has been amazing. In fact, I have a little image here. There's the image here. It's called God's Name Combinations with Keith Johnson, Pure and Simple. Look, 8-episode series on a Rood Awakening YouTube channel, free. I'm thinking, okay, that's it. We're done.
Yeah.
You know, I've seen Michael. Michael's been back in the studio. I've watched him on the Priest SNLs, and he's got that energy, and you guys are doing a great job. So I'm thinking, okay, it's great. Michael's back. Okay, we're done. And then Ted says, hey, do you got one more bullet? Do you got one more thing you can do for SNL? I said, yeah, I do. And I prayed about it, and I thought, what would Michael do? WWMD. Michael wouldn't be afraid to lean into a little controversy, and so I've decided to go to the back of this book, which is the most controversial chapter of the book.
Okay.
It's called, What About the Name Jesus?
Ooh.
And when I wrote the book, His Hallowed Name Revealed Again, I had several people, some of them very well known. Great book, they said, but don't put in that chapter.
Why?
Don't put in the chapter about Jesus. You're mixing too much. It's too much controversy. It's too much confusion. They'll light torches. I had to do it. Because I realized if I don't address this issue, the name Jesus, people are going to get confused. And so I did, I guess people would say, don't mess with the name Jesus. I mean, in other words, leave that alone. You can do this thing on the Hebrew name of God, and you can do this thing on the Old Testament, and you can do this, but don't mess with Jesus. I did it anyway, because as I said, what would Michael do?
Yeah.
He wouldn't mind leaning in, so that's exactly what I did. And so what I want to do before we get started is, we're calling this is a Why Not Jesus? And before we get started, I want to talk to those people out there that think we're going to probably beat them over the head and tell them, you know, you're doing the wrong thing. I have had, Scott, what I call a Jesus journey. And I want to share my Jesus journey.
Okay.
And then after I share my Jesus journey, I want you to share your Jesus journey.
Oh, okay. Sure.
I'm going to challenge people that are watching to share their Jesus journey. And I would say probably, I won't think I'm overstating this, 95% of the people who are watching us have a Jesus journey. Here's how mine started. Age 14, I walked into a classroom in junior high school. There was a young lady named Angel that was sitting in my Portuguese class. Você fala português? No, I still remember. Você fala português?
Nope.
I can know Portuguese. Okay. 9th grade, I'm in my Portuguese class. I walk in and I see my friend Angel, and she's reading a book. I said, Angel, what are you reading? It says, I'm reading the Bible. It says, if you don't accept Jesus, you're going to hell. I said, what must I do? True story. She said, go home, pray, ask God into your heart, and everything will change. I go home. Now, Scott, I am not a church guy. I didn't grow up in the church. I had no church background. I didn't know about the Bible. I knew nothing about church. I go home, get on my knees in my bedroom, and I pray and I say, God, Angel says, I need a ticket to heaven. It's Jesus. So I'm going to invite him into my life. The next day, I'm working as a courtesy carryout engineer. Do you know what that is? Courtesy
I do not.
carryout
Tell me
sure
about
you
that.
Do. It's a bag boy.
Oh.
I call it a courtesy carryout engineer. I'm working as a courtesy carryout engineer, and as I'm bagging groceries, a lady walks by and she drops a $20 bill. I look at the $20 bill and I say, now that I've invited Jesus into my heart, what should I do? I pick up the $20 bill, I go to the lady, I say, ma'am, you dropped a $20 bill, and she just looked at me. This is back in I shouldn't tell you how old I am, but it was in the 70s.
Okay.
$20 was a lot of money. I was making probably $3.50 an hour. Hand it to her, she just looks at me. The next day, I run into my Portuguese class. Angel, I'm a Christian. I gave the lady the $20 bill, and this began my Jesus journey, I'm telling you. At about 15, I get a letter from the church, neighborhood church, United Methodist Church, that invites me to a trip to Florida. And in the letter, it says, for those who want to understand how to be a Christian, you'll want to take this trip. It was during Christmas, 1975 or something. I go to the church. I say, I want to go on this trip. That's where I met my wife, Andrea, by the way. I still remember what she wore. Black and white, turtleneck. I still remember, beautiful. I met her on that trip. Took a while to convince her to marry me, but I first met her on that trip. I went on the trip, and we sang songs. Kumbaya, and around the campfire, and I learned all the Jesus songs. I learned the Jesus stories. On this trip, I learned about Jesus. I mean, I'm telling you, it was during Christmas. I was excited, my Jesus journey. Then after being in corporate world, I started an inner city ministry to kids. I taught them about Jesus. I had a ministry to athletes called Christian Athletes United for Spiritual Empowerment. I am full-blown Jesus guy. And then I went to Israel and met Michael in 2002. And my Jesus journey went to a completely different level. Because at that point, what I realized, even after seminary, Scott, I went to Trinity, say Trinity.
Trinity.
Evangelical, say evangelical.
Evangelical.
Seminary. I spent 3.5 years there. They taught me about Jesus. They taught me about church history. They taught me about theology. They taught me about everything you could imagine. But what they didn't teach me about is what was under the name Jesus. And there was a reason that they didn't do that. So this has been my Jesus journey. And actually, like I said, I put in the back of the book, what about the name Jesus? Because I don't believe that we can understand his ministry and his message without really understanding his original given name. Before we go further, tell me, Scott, tell me if I'm wrong. I say 95% of the people had a Jesus journey. I didn't ask you this ahead of time. Did you have a Jesus journey?
Yeah.
Tell me about your Jesus journey.
So, grew up in the church. What
kind of church was it?
It was a Baptist church.
Okay.
So mom and dad always went to church, so I went with them, did the whole Sunday school thing, all that type of thing. And then went to a Mennonite high school, which people think Mennonite, well, you think like Amish and things like that. Well, no, it's where I grew up near Vancouver, Canada. The Mennonites were kind of like Baptists on steroids. A few more rules and things like that. We never had school dances. That was the biggest thing. No dancing. Of course, the no drinking thing and that kind of thing. Okay, so I grew up in the Mennonite high school, and then met my wife, and we'll skip a few years there, and we started going to a non-denominational church with a friend of ours, and he invited us to be part of his leadership team.
Now, you're still a Jesus guy now.
I'm still a Jesus guy, yeah. So this is in the late mid-90s. And he invited us to be part of his leadership team, and so I was the secretary to the board of this non-denominational, leaning charismatic type of church. Because my wife and I both gotten into the Pentecostal movement while we were working at a radio station, which was not a Christian radio station, just a regular rock station, that kind of thing. She had just been converted. I've been a Christian all my life, and I
knew you had some rock and roll, and you kind of got to walk that rock and roll walk. You kind of got some rock.
Well, I did. You see, I used to have a blonde curly mullet.
Come on.
I did. And then God said...
Just a second. Post-production, can they put up a picture of...
Oh, man, you don't want to do that.
Go ahead.
And then God said, we're not doing that again. Okay. So he just took it away.
Right,
So anyway, I did that, and so we were part of this Pentecostal church in the leadership team. Another couple on this leadership team decided to call us into their home, and they said, we've decided we're doing church on the wrong day. We've discovered something. And we've been listening to these tapes by a guy named Brad Scott.
Really?
And we went, okay, really? Well, here it is. It's, his name is Yeshua, for example.
Okay.
And we shouldn't be calling him Jesus and all this. And we're supposed to be doing church on the Sabbath and all this. And Eddie Chumney was also part of these tapes.
Yeah.
So my wife started getting into this. I didn't. She was more into it. She was like, oh, yeah, we're doing this all wrong. Well, of course, being the leader of the home, I was frustrated by this because I thought, well, this is what I learned all my life. How could what I learned all my life be wrong? And that's where my Jesus journey took a turn, because I said to my wife, okay, listen, if you're going to keep doing this, we might have to go separate ways. Yeah, this is where I was.
That big a deal?
I was that big of a deal.
Why was it such a big deal?
Because I thought she was denying who Jesus was. That whole thing that you don't first understand when you get into this type of thing. And so I thought, your friend is leading us away, and if you're going to go their way, our 2-year-old and how old was, we had a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old at that point. We might have to just forget this.
Because you at that point knew that you'd found something about this Jesus that was different than what you had learned.
Yeah, and I thought, well, how could it be so different? In the end, of course, it wasn't different, but you first encounter that and it seems different. So I said to my wife, I said, okay, fine, we'll listen to Brad Scott. I like the kind of stuff he's saying, I don't know, but we're gonna do this. It was a cassette tape, right? So cassette tapes.
This is a long time
ago. This is back in the old days when we had cassette tapes. Yeah, so I said, we're gonna put in the cassette tapes, but this is what we're gonna do. At any moment, I have a question, we're gonna pause it, we're gonna look it up in the Bible. If I can refute what he's saying, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. So we'd pause it, we'd look it up. Okay, he was right on that one. Play it again, stop, look it up. Okay, he was right on that one too, I guess. I could not refute anything Brad Scott said on these.
So you
tapes.
used your Bible.
Oh yeah, we were serious Bible students at this point. We were really looking it up. And eventually I kind of went, okay, I get it. And then there was a whole frustration. You know, I got so mad one day after church because we were going to church and telling our pastor about this. And of course, we were so excited about it. And you know how that goes. Tell our pastor anyway. So and at one point I was so frustrated, I didn't know whether to go to the left or to the right, and I didn't know what to do. And I remember on the dashboard of our Toyota Corolla, I was in the passenger seat and I was so mad, I smashed the dashboard so hard it left a dent to the day we sold it off to somebody else. But that's how intense it got. I was angry because I thought, how could I be leading my family astray for so long? And eventually you realize it's not really astray. There's just some things you just didn't know in between.
I'll tell you something, Scott. Having been a pastor, having a master's degree, pastor, I'm teaching, I'm doing everything I'm doing, and in 2002 I go to Israel, and it was as if the Father literally peeled away everything. And one of the key things that happened, I was actually in Bethlehem. And as I was in Bethlehem, that's a story unto itself. As I was in Bethlehem, I went to the church of the Nativity. And as I'm there, so many things were peeled away about the Jesus that I had embraced. Not only that, his birth and where his birth was and what his name was. And I remember coming home, and I've told the story 1,000 times, I won't tell it here. But one thing I've never told is that when I got home, I sat my family down. And you know, I didn't have the whole pastoral 3T thing going, time, Torah, tetragrammaton, but I told them, here's what's happening. And my wife, I will never forget it, when I explained to her about the name Jesus and how we could go into the Bible and show with no questions asked that Jesus wasn't his name. My wife sat at the table and she looked and she said, I don't know about everything else you're talking about, but in my spirit, that resonates with me. There's something about Jesus. Now, I got to tell you, there's a powerful song, something about the name Jesus. The sweetest name I've ever known. I'm telling you folks, when you talk about Jesus, some of the most moving music that exists has to do with Jesus. And I know that there's a lot of people that are watching, Scott, that have a Jesus journey. Some of them are ashamed of it. Some of them are like you, mad about it. Some of them are like me that says, man, I mean, I cannot deny that where I was in my journey at that time, God used Jesus for me. But where I'm at now is that it's time for a shift. And it's happening society-wide. So what I want to ask people to do as we switch to the next thing here is I want people to ask the question, what is their Jesus journey? And we're going to have a break eventually. During the break, whoever you're watching this with, share your Jesus journey with who you're with. And I guarantee you'll find that God used that Jesus journey. Here's what I'd like to say. If you want to understand the message and ministry of Jesus, that's italicized, you must, say must.
Must.
Understand the power and purpose of his original given name. Otherwise, you can create your own Jesus and your own religion. And isn't that what we've seen throughout history? What this is really about, Scott, is getting him connected back to language, history, and context. What the Western Christian church has done on purpose, historically, is to separate him from his root. Separate him from the first century. Separate him from the people, the land, and the God of Israel, so that we can create a new religion that literally lets us off the hook.
Okay.
What do you think of that?
Yeah, well,
How does that sit with you?
well, I don't like that. I mean, it's like if we separate him, who is he? And then, like you said, we can make him up. I mean, what do you think is the whole crux behind making Jesus relevant in churches today? Why?
Well, here's what's happening, and we're gonna lean into this a little bit more.
Okay.
There is presently a very powerful movement taking place. Many people have seen it on TV. It's called the He Gets Us movement, and they take the name Jesus, and they've done a huge campaign. I want to do something right now, just for a second. I would like to show on the screen the introduction that they've used all over YouTube, all over television. Can we just show this real quick?
Okay. I see. So they're using the us and the Jesus.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I mean, and listen, let me tell you something. I don't know if you've seen these commercials yet.
I
was
have,
actually
yeah.
watching the World Championships in track, and in the middle of that, up comes this commercial. And again, I've seen these pop up here and there. Come to find out, Scott, 28 million as of the time of this recording, YouTube views of the He Gets Us movement. 28 million. They're using a very powerful marketing tool. And I'm going to share some of the information about this. It says this, description, He Gets Us, is not affiliated with any church, religious denomination, or political organization. Our goal is to help everyone understand and relate to Jesus as he's depicted in the Bible with the modern lens of his radical forgiveness, compassion, and love. We feel his teachings and lived experiences are as relevant to us today as they were 2,000 years ago. We strive to provide a safe place for people to ask questions, even tough ones, without fear or judgment. It gets better. He Gets Us is an initiative of Servant Foundation, a designated 501c3 organization with a 100/100 charity navigator rating. We're funded by a diverse group of donors passionate, here it comes, about freeing the name of Jesus from those who would use it to judge, harm, or divide. They do a number of commercials. One is on alone, one is on good times, one is on the rebel, one is on birth, one is on anxiety. I think we've got just a little bit of time left. I want to show one more.
Okay.
This one is called Outrage. These commercials are focused on culture without language, history, and context. Let's take a look right now.
There was this controversial figure. Everywhere he went, people challenged him. They questioned his ideology, trolled him, called him ugly names. But he never took the bait, never raised his voice, refused to retaliate, because he believed he could change the world by turning the other cheek.
He gets us. The question is this, Scott. Do we get him? Now, they just said something about him on commercial. It says he never got upset. He always turned. Did they ever look at Matthew 23:27? Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you're like whitewashed tombs. Did they ever look at John 2:15? And he made a scourge of cords and drove them all out of the temple and turned over tables. Again, you cannot separate Jesus from language, history, and context of the Bible. What you and I are going to do is help people embrace and understand his original name as it was given, and hopefully they're going to invite family and friends to this series so that those Jesus folks out there that are on the journey, you can still call him Jesus, but please understand, well, let me say this, there's a couple things we're going to bring questions for them. If they understand these questions, they're going to understand exactly what his ministry and his message was.
Okay, all right, so hold that thought. We are going to come back. Thank you, Keith, for being here. Thank you for being here. Let's straighten this out. Who is Jesus? Why not Jesus? Is Yeshua necessary? If it is, we're going to find out in a second why we should call him Yeshua and what it means and all the rest of it. So come back in a couple of minutes. We thank you very much for watching. It's your donations and the donations of others that made this possible. If you donate, you can allow others to see this into the future. That's the whole point, isn't it? Okay, we'll be right back. Thank you for doing it. Hey, thank you for donating to this ministry. It makes these programs possible. And Keith, before the break, you were talking about Jesus gets us, but do we get him? Good question.
That's a great question.
So where does this marketing come from? What direction is this intended to take us in?
I know some folks, there's some people that are very excited about this campaign. There's other people that see it as very negative because they're saying it's giving people the wrong idea of who he is. I don't want to get into that. I just want to share what they say about the campaign itself. It's a $100 million ad campaign. That's the kind of money they use for Mercedes-Benz.
Yeah.
$100 million ad campaign aims to make Jesus, quote, the biggest brand in your city. He gets us an effort to attract skeptics and cultural Christians. That's what they say they want to do. We're going to get to that. Because I love it when you get that. There's this look you have, Scott. I love the look. You know, people will be talking, you have the guest up here talking, and all of a sudden Scott will lean in and your eyebrows will raise.
Wait a minute.
Hang on to that. I want you to hang on to that. It says this. This is from their marketing guru. He says, we did 4 to 5 months worth of research. And by the way, we were taping The Name of God Pure and Simple at the time that this was launched.
Oh, really?
The Name of God Pure and Simple, which again, free on YouTube, 4 episodes where people are opening their Bible, understanding the name of God. I didn't see the commercial back then, but I can tell now Maestro was working because it, honestly, I mean, I want to just say to you, Scott, I had some trepidation about doing this here because we're going to go into the nitty gritty. It's almost easier. Hey, it's in the back of my book. I'm not going to talk about it. You go read it. But now we're going to get into the nitty gritty and give people even more information. But here's what he says. We did 4 to 5 months worth of research, and what we found was that skeptics and even cultural Christians weren't so much interested in Christians, Christianity, and the church, but they very much still resonated with Jesus.
Okay.
In other words, if you package Jesus the right way, forget about the church, whatever that is. Forget about Christianity, whatever that is. Forget about other Christians. if you package him the right way, you can separate him completely. I think we're watching in our lifetime something that is, and I said this to Avia as we were doing the makeup. I said, you know, I'm not sure if we've switched chapters or if we're in a completely different book. But in the last couple years, in our lifetime, things have changed. I will say this, Scott. I was in Israel and I told the group that I tell the people every time I go to Israel, I say every time I go to Israel, it's as if the Father gives me a glimpse of what is coming. I'll never forget it. When I went to Israel, I was with Michael during the time after 9/11. I saw what was coming. It's not because I'm being a prophet. Not because I've got some inside, track to the secretness of God's counsel. Israel seems to be the place where things happen and where they're happening and where they're shifting. And when you're there and you can understand, that's why when I was there in 2020, I said to myself, something is going to change. And I got back in 2020 and we have not been back to pre-2020 at least in the last 2 years. Would you agree?
Right.
I mean, just as far as culture, can we just talk for a minute? Some of the shifts and changes that have taken care in terms of culture, and what they've done is they've clicked into the cultural Christians. The cultural Christians who say this: what color are we dealing with today? What issue are we dealing with today? By the way, since I would do What Would Michael Do, can I be a little controversial?
Please do, yes.
I went to Trinity Evangelical Seminary, and I find most evangelicals have become evan-politicals. They are more concerned about politics than they are about the message. And that's an example where people say, well, what's the color? What's the issue right now? What cultural Christians do is they look at culture first, and they say, what should we do? Rather than looking at the book, I say, what caught your attention? Cultural Christians versus biblical believers. What I love about a Rood Awakening International, you are not, have not, and will never be making decisions based on culture. You always like for people to open the book, and that is exactly what we're going to do. He gets us, but do we get him? For the last 2,000 years, Scott, individuals and organizations have placed the name Jesus into boxes of personal and political and cultural agendas that separate him from his original language, history, and context. I talk about this all the time. I love this whole thing, language, history, and context. Because if you take those three things, you can get under what's happening. They have effectively created new religions based on the name Jesus. The He Gets Us movement with the $100 million, I guarantee you, a year from now, I'll say He Gets Us and people know exactly what I'm talking about. Wouldn't it be something if there was $100 million, by the way, all you supporters out there, support a Rood Awakening. Let's get $100 million to do a Yeshua campaign. Let's get $100 million to start teaching people language, history, and context. We shouldn't have to be sitting up here talking about we need this amount of money. There's enough believers that we should be able to have. Money should not be an issue. And so that's my little...
We could create a campaign, say yes to Yeshua.
Oh,
see? It's that easy.
Just say yes. You know what's really funny about that, Scott? We're actually going to go through the progression of how we got to Jesus. Do you know there's one of the... Can I tell you this right now? One of the progressions to his name is actually Yesu. So yes, we could say you need to say yes.
See, they need to give us the $100 million campaign.
What's $100 million between friends? And you know what they say? It's a small group of people that gave $100 million. And what they're able to do is they're to go to the prince of the power of the air and spread this message everywhere. What you guys and what we need to be is we need to be that salt that will continue. We need to be that light that will continue to lift up truth. He says, worship me in spirit and in truth. And that's what we're going to do. So let's get into the nitty gritty. I want you to open up to Luke chapter 2, verse 41. Now, Scott, before you open, will you tell us about your Bible? For those that didn't see the name of God, pure and simple, where you explain that Bible, act like they didn't see it.
Okay.
Because they clicked in because they said, why not Jesus? What are they going to talk about Jesus? Whoa. I'm asking you to bring your book. Why did you pick that one?
So this is an old book. I liked it because I saw it in a used bookstore. It was only $5. You can see it has painter's tape on it, and it's been read and read. And there's tons of notes in the margin, that type of thing. But it mentioned the name Yehovah. It puts Yehovah in here, so I thought, oh, that's interesting. And it's a Catholic Bible. So the Apocrypha is in here. all of the interesting books that aren't in our regular Bibles. So that's why I liked having it as well. Now, it's not the most perfect translation, but as we discovered in the last series, there's some very interesting translations.
Absolutely.
So that's why I like having it.
Okay. Well, this is going to be your main Bible. I want folks to know I've got here my first Christian study Bible. Okay. I remember I always tell the story that first what they offered me was the little book or the big book. They said, okay, Keith, now that you're a Christian, you need to read the Bible. Which book would you like to read? They handed me a little book, which was the Gospel of John, or the big book, which was the big Bible. I said, I'll take the little book. I read the little book, the Gospel of John. I went to them, I said, oh. They said, hey, listen, we're going to give you the whole New Testament. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And I opened up Matthew, and it says in Matthew chapter 1. In fact, let me just do this real quick before we get into this. Matthew chapter 1, it says, this is my book I'm reading now. I'm a new Christian, never been in the Bible. It says, the book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son, yep, that's the one I knew, Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son, and it's Abraham was the father of Isaac. And I stopped and I said to them, now where do I learn about Abraham? And they said, oh, that's in the other book. Oh, okay. And I read farther, and Isaac was the father of Jacob, and Jacob was the father of Judah. And I said to them, I said, hey, where's this Judah? That's in the big book. I said, oh, okay. And Judah, the father of, and it goes on, and David. And I said to them, where are all these people? They said, that's in the big book. I said, well, give me that book. And they handed me what is called the Harper Study Bible, the Holy Bible, Old and New Testaments. And I've got this thing marked up. I've had it for all these years. And this is the Bible that I was studying, that I'm going to bring some of the information from here for why it was that I never really understood the language and history of Jesus. What's under him. Would you go to Luke chapter 2, verse 41, and read it for us nice and loud?
Luke 2:41 reads, every year his parents used to go to Jerusalem for the Feast of Passover.
Oh, I love that. Stop. Is that something you knew about when Passover when you were in your Jesus? Because I was not a Passover,
No, Passover, I knew it was about around the same time as Easter, and it probably meant the same thing.
Something to do with something, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's get to the real issue, which is Jesus, right? Okay, so go ahead, read it, keep reading.
Okay. When he was 12 years old, they went up for the feast as usual. When they were on their way...
Stop for a second. So usual, meaning why would they go as usual? What does that mean as usual? So understanding language, history, context?
Just like an annual thing they went to.
And we find that in the big book, that was something that they were called to do. Okay, go ahead.
When they were on their way home after the feast, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem without his parents knowing it.
Yes.
They assumed he was with the caravan. And it was only after a day's journey that they went to look for him among their relatives and acquaintances. When they failed to find him, they went back to Jerusalem looking for him everywhere.
Verse 46.
3 days later.
Stop.
Okay.
You see the 3 days? Come on now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
3 days. Go ahead. So for 3 days, now hold on now. It says 3 days later. So this means that they went for the caravan. So there must have been cousins and aunts and uncles. And maybe you've been on a situation like that where your kids get in the other car with the other people. We used to do picnics where we'd go together as a family, but on the way home, hey, can I ride with cousin so-and-so? Maybe they're thinking he's riding with someone else.
Sure.
3 days later, what happens?
They found him in the temple, sitting among the doctors, as my Bible calls them, listening to them and asking them questions.
Now, here's my simple question, first question. How did they find Jesus? First century. Did they get on a loudspeaker and say something like, Jesus, please meet your parents at the eastern gate?
No.
Did they do? Maybe there's a big loudspeaker and they said, hey, there's a lost boy named Jesus, please bring him. Did that happen?
Probably.
Maybe 3 days, maybe they made a little poster and put his picture up and said, missing Jesus. Is that? No, I'm just saying.
Put him on a milk carton?
Okay,
goat milk carton?
So here's the issue. In the languages of the first century in Israel, and again, I know we got people, we're preaching to the choir. Some people, Keith, we already know that. But there's a congregation that doesn't know, and there's a crowd of people out there we're trying to reach. Here's what letting them know. In the first century, there was no possibility of calling on the loudspeaker or putting on a poster the name Jesus or speaking the name Jesus. It didn't exist in the first century. That's something that you know. If they would have announced the original given name, there could have been many young boys in Jerusalem who may have asked, are they looking for me?
Right.
If they would have called out in his original name and they had a loudspeaker, there could have been a lot of boys said, I heard my name. Okay, that's a possibility. Now, the anglicized name Jesus did not exist in first century Israel. In the languages that were in first century Israel, we will say there were 4, okay? Hebrew/Aramaic, same kind of letters, but some shifts. Latin or Greek. In Hebrew/Aramaic, Latin or Greek, you could not say Jesus as we say it today. Is that surprising?
No, not at all. That seems pretty tough.
Okay, now go to John chapter 19, verse 19.
All right, John 19:19 reads, okay. The notice was read by many of the Jews. Speaking of the note on the top of the cross.
Give us a little context. What's happening here?
So this is when Yeshua was being crucified.
Yes.
They're putting his accusation above his head, and this is what it reads.
Okay.
The notice was read by many of the Jews because the place where Jesus was crucified was not far from the city, and the writing was in Hebrew, Latin, and Greek.
I'm going to read John 19:20. Therefore, many of the Jews read this inscription. For the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and it was written in Hebrew, Latin, and in Greek. So now we've got what happened when he was lost. If they were looking for him, who did they look for? There was no Jesus.
Right.
And at the time of his crucifixion, when Pilate put up in Hebrew or Aramaic / Latin and Greek, and he wrote it, it didn't say Jesus. Now here's great news. At the end of this series, we're going to do such a great job by the end of this series. People will be able to identify as if they were in the first century what his name would have been in Hebrew, Aramaic, Latin, and Greek. We're actually going to help folks do that.
Okay.
Our approach in this little series on why not Jesus, we want people to invite their neighbors. We want people to invite their family and friends. We want people to come and watch Shabbat Night Live and say to them, hey, these guys are going to be opening the Bible to help us understand Jesus. And they'll say to them, you say to them, hey, have you seen the He Gets Us commercials? They're going to be helping us get him, okay? And we're going to open it up, Scott, and we're going to take these Bibles. Now, I have a bunch of them here. I just want to take just a second and tell you what I have here. I have here the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew. This is George Howard's text. We talk about it all the time. We're doing a series that's actually on the Rood Awakening app. It's on YouTube. It's on Facebook. Hebrew Gospel Pearls, where Nehemiah Gordon and I go through this process, each section, and we're doing language, history, and context on the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew. We're going to be looking at this. We actually also did a little book, Prayer to Our Father, Hebrew Origins of the Lord's Prayer. I believe it's available at a Rood Awakening. I've got here the NASB. This is the Hebrew Greek Key Study Bible. I always used to tell people, you got to get this Bible if you're not willing to go into understanding everything about the language. Since doing Hebrew Gospel Pearls, I had to throw this Bible under the bus. Come to find out that beyond the language that they do, there's a theological agenda that I really hadn't looked at until Nehemiah and I started really jumping in. And those episodes, as I mentioned, are at a Rood Awakenings app, where I realized that if you're going to do language, but you're going to make theology go first, that's actually pretty dangerous. And so we're going to be taking a look at this Bible. I'm excited about this one, Scott. This is the 1599 Geneva Bible.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Now, this is a printing of the 1599 Geneva Bible. There's some information in this Bible, Scott, that is absolutely amazing. This would have been the English translation from 1530 that the Pilgrims would have brought on the Mayflower.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That is neat.
Very exciting. And again, what we're going to find through these Bibles, there is a journey, there is a process. It's really a phenomenal process that we went through that goes from that time that Jesus is lost, quote unquote, or the time on the cross where they wrote his name, to where we are today with our English Bibles. And what we find in the progression of these English Bibles, we get to the place where we understand why the He Gets Us thing is so effective. Because what the English Bibles do, in effect, is separate Jesus from the Bible. They make him a standalone. You said something, Scott. I don't know if you remember what you said, but you were talking about this so what was under it? Do you remember what you said pre-production?
About versus what you just said?
Yes.
Yeah, so if we're separating Jesus from the context and the history of everything of where he came from, we maybe need to separate ourselves from that Jesus and go the other way.
Say that again, because that's really radical, what you're saying. Say that just one more time.
So if we are being separated, or if the name of Jesus is causing us to be separated from his context, we maybe need to separate ourselves from the name Jesus.
And you know what? That is exactly what I had to do. And I'm telling you folks, I don't judge people. I don't beat them on the head. In fact, there are times when we're talking where I'm speaking to a group of people who don't know anything about his original name and language. I'll start just where they are. And again, I don't have any judgment about that. But here's what I say, and I want to say it again. If you decide you want to use the name Jesus, be sure you understand the language, history, and context of the original name that he was given. Otherwise, you find yourself in a completely different place that was not his ministry or his message. If there's anything that I want to say it again, if we want to get to his message and we want to get to his ministry, we got to understand the power and purpose of his original given name. And that is what we're going to do through each of these things. So, I guess what we could do right now, if we got time, we probably don't have time, do we? I'll tell you what. Can I come back? Is this too radical? Too controversial? Or can I come back for another series?
Well, you usually do, so why not?
I can come back for another episode?
Why not?
Can we get into the nitty-gritty on this thing?
Absolutely, yeah, we're just scratching the surface here. We haven't even made it to any of these other books on the table, so we've got to get there. So I'm thinking at least a couple more weeks. Why not?
Excellent, excellent.
Let's do it. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
All right, and thank you for being here. We've just scratched the surface here, like I just said. So why not Jesus? Well, that's a very good question. It may have some loaded answers as well. So hopefully you'll join us next week. Thank you for joining us. Until then, Shavua Tov.
Shalom, Torah fans. Give this video a thumbs up and share it with a friend. Tap the subscription button and the bell icon. And I promise to update weekly with in-depth biblical research. Be sure to download the new michaelrood.tv app for both mobile and home devices for even more commercial-free content.